Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and welcome to Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bells to see when we got new videos, leave a comment. We read and check all our comments. Go to our website, www.legendsofsuperstitionmountain.com. Check out all the stuff we got over there, including the bark notes. There's swags, merchandise, different things, a bibliography of different books you might want to pick up, and kind of some of the links to where you can get them. This week, what do we talk about? And I was going through a number of files and kind of starting to brush myself up. And sometimes it's kind of a last minute decision thing. But the thing that I was thinking about, and I'd had a few discussions on it, is I'll sit back and start talking to someone and then start asking myself questions kind of in the conversation. And one of them is, how do you get someone to point A to point B? If I'm dealing with someone, let's say particularly I'm going to pick something random, let's say Wisconsin or Minnesota, and the guy's never really been out here. He has Google Earth, and he kind of thinks he's read a few books and he's looked on forums and online stuff, and he thinks he kind of knows this stuff. And I'm trying to explain and tell him how to get somewhere. Now, he has several advantages. One, there's place names, there's maps, and suddenly information. Now, I know one particular individual was very interested in a site. I was very familiar. I've been to the area. And I gave him various routes. He wasn't listening to what I was saying, was trying these different routes. I don't think he ever made it even halfway to where he was going. The first, he had a step A, step B, step C. I kept telling him I wasn't seeing anything in the area. Told him when weather cooled down, I might make a trip out that area to kind of go see. It was going to be a day or two trip. But he had made several attempts and found how difficult it was. Now, this is with having maps, information, talking with me telling him how long it was going to take him. He was traveling through a lot of washes and stuff, which I said is a lot slower. And I was trying to make a point. He was able to describe things, and as he described things, I was able to pick out where he was going, particular things he was interested in what area, and I was giving him what I thought was the easiest routes. He was seeing it as, well, this is 3 miles longer than this route. I want to go, but I kept telling him it's flat. You want the easiest route because you're going to make better time, better ground, so why not take the flat, hard surface there than this shorter distance that's in washes and up and down, and you have elevation changes. So he never made it. I don't know. He kind of like got quiet. It could be just the summers here, and I'll hear from him again this fall. But I reflect on those things of like how difficult it is, and people will tell me, well, I went to this spot, it was 12 miles, it was 8 miles, it was 7 miles, it was 3.5 miles. It changes and varies. And I'm like, I know the distances, and distances are lengthened because of how you maneuver down the trails and through the canyons. Again, and someone will start describing something, and I'll say, oh, that's what you're talking about this. I can kind of tell you, I know the different routes to get there. And they get kind of thrown off because they're going by Google Earth, Google Maps, and I'm trying to step by step walk them through and saying, okay, when you get to this point, you'll see this site. This is what we call this. And try to, I realize how difficult it is. Now let's take ourselves back to 1890, 1891. And you got a couple people that live in Phoenix. They're starting from downtown Phoenix, remember. So we got to start from downtown Phoenix. They've never been in the mountains. They know those are the Superstition Mountains. People have pointed at them probably, or telling you something. They're the Superstition Mountains. There's probably something about those. They might have heard of the term Weaver's Needle. There are no roads. There are no trails. There's no signage. There's no nothing. And you have to take those two people and find a way to explain to them how to get somewhere. And what I thought the challenge was like, I sat around and started thinking, okay, I want to send someone to Blacktop Mesa. And I found the difficulty is even getting started, because how do I direct them? Because you can say right now, we'll take the 60, go down. When you get to Apache Junction, get up onto the Apache Trail, take the Apache Trail to First Water. When you get to the First Water Blower parking lot, get on the trail, and yeah, it's pretty simple because you'll just stay to the right. Don't take the, you know, the second water trail. Don't go through First Water, go the other route, and you'll go through Brush Corral Basin. And you're going to see a mountain on the right and left, and there's a kind of a narrow way. You'll see a sign that says, you know, Bull Pass. You want to just head that way, but then you'll notice there's this cairns and a trail that goes up the mountain that has kind of a blackish top to it. It's kind of a wedge shape. It kind of angles like this, but it's parallel to another mountain that we call Palomino. And you get on Palomino, you'll be able to see Palomino clearly, and it's kind of easy because I got all these references. I got First Water, I got the 60, I got this. I'm starting you from downtown Phoenix, and I have not absolutely a road, and I'm giving you directions, and you don't travel. You're not a person that's covering all this ground. You don't understand the relationship of this. And it's like, wow, how do you explain that to somebody? And if you're telling someone the first gorge, the first canyon, what are you talking about from this? From the southern end of what? So I've always looked at it as you're going down Peralta Road, and let's just say Peralta Road doesn't exist, but let's say you get it right and you're on the southern end of the Superstitions and you go into that first gorge and that first canyon. Is it Hog Canyon? I mean, is it Hieroglyphic Canyon? Is it, are you heading up Kearney Springs? I mean, where are you deciding that's that canyon that way? Is it when you finally get to Willow's Bark? Is it even further along? Are you heading out to Spanish Graveyard and going up that way? Are you using Miner's Needle because you can't see the hole in it till you're there? So you would have to go all this long way around the southern part of the mountains to get to a certain specific point and then start heading north towards it. And I realize how difficult that is. Now, John Spangler spoke and said there was a lot of information, and I know some of the information that they searched with, that Jim Bark and Simsili used, additionally that John Spangler used. One of these things was John Chuning's diary and journal, which they had. John Chuning gave this to Jim Bark before he passed away, and I'm sure the Spangler family has it somewhere. I don't think it's anywhere publicly available. So you would have information in that because he got things from Deering, and they really felt that the Deering-Chuning story was the same as the Two Soldiers story, which was the same as the Waltz story. Now, I've always believed these things could be connected, they could be separate. And the important aspect is if they have anything to do with the Mexican mining of the early 1800s, finding one would help you find the rest. Now, what is the most important clue? Because I've seen videos where people talk about what's the, you know, the board house or the milk ranch or this or that. The most important clue, because there's tons of mines and everything you can find, would be the description of the mine and the vein and the ore, because it would still be there. Walt said it was still there, but even if someone went and took the gold out, you would still see the hematite locked in the quartz locked in the hematite, and the same thing 18 inches. You'd still see that figuratively. So that would be the telltale sign. You can have a pit mine, a funnel mine. You can take and vary the descriptions. Unfortunately, that doesn't help you get there, and that's the big problem. So think about it as an exercise in futility, as even just simple as the bulldog. As much as I say that's a simple one, you'd have to kind of point to that into the superstitions, get someone and say, when you hit that point, it's right there, and it'd be easier. It'd be significantly easier. But someone could wide shoot it. I've had people go in the mountains. We've seen people get lost on the trailheads that are marked and displayed, and they can't find their way. I found, I don't know how many times people lost up in Barks Canyon and Barks Draw that were going up to Needle Canyon. And it's just like, how did you get there? You didn't read a book? You don't have a map? Yeah, I got a map, and we're following that. And I'm like, but people would make cairns, and they would make cairns going routes that they like to go, like, here's a possible way, because people liked the gun sight clue and thing concerning Barks Draw of going up and seeing Weaver's Needle and like the gun sight. Well, they'd follow those cairns, and that's taking them north and basically kind of northwest, not taking them an easterly direction to Needle Canyon. So again, if I'm going to tell you something, I don't have the roads, I don't have the trails, I don't have the US 60. I can't tell you go by Gold Canyon, and when you get to the Peralta Estates, turn on Peralta Road. And as you go down the road, you hit the split, and bear to your left, because to the right will take you to the quarter circle U. But if you bear to the left, you'll get up, and if you're trying to go to the Don's camp and you get to the trailhead parking lot with the restroom, you went too far, go back. There's a little turn to a big round parking lot. It's easy today because I have things that are etched in stone. Waltz didn't. Waltz didn't have names. He didn't have mountain names. He's telling them just a peak. A peak to Waltz means what? For someone that had visited there, what, 5, 6, 7 times maybe the most? What is that peak to him? He's just trying to tell them when you're in the right area, there's a peak here, there's a peak there. Well, we can go anywhere in the mountains in north-south trending canyons and find peaks every which direction. And then he talks 4 peaks. It could be the San Francisco 4 peaks, but then he could have actually said that. He makes references to things, and I think we have a tendency to say, well, that's what that must have meant. Now, Matt Cavaniss at the Quarter Circle U, we know someone was living there and there was someone in there at that time. But Hewitt's even a difficult one. If you're a big fan of the whole Silver Chief and the Pit Mine, just think if you had no roads or no way to describe anything and you were trying to get someone into Hewitt and get them up to Rogers Trough, just to get them to where the trailhead is or where you could kind of work the ridge over to the Silver Chief. Just think about that, because right now it still would take me 10 minutes and I would probably draw it out on maps and stuff, and I have really good ability to show you how the roads go and where the parking lot is and what kind of which way and a distance. I can give you something far more detailed than Waltz could give them, and I'm sure you're still going to struggle with it. So what does that mean when you're going in? I mean, how do I describe the Hewitt turnoff? You get down to Queen Creek, you follow Queen Creek. Well, there's no road now. So now I got to use some monumented mountain and say that. But there's so many mountains that you could mistake for that. How do I do that? Which is why I think Walt said, I want to take you in and get you to a point where I can take you with the wagon and point it out at least. And at least get them in the general right direction. And I think that's why he gave them so many different directions and different versions, was he was trying to find, do I take them in the way I was leaving? Do I take them the way I went most of the time? Which direction is the best? And I think it's just a great thing for everyone to sit back and look at things from the perspective of, okay, let's erase everything. You don't have Google Maps. All you have is there's a lost mine somewhere in the superstitions, and you want to tell someone how to get to a specific place without using place names, directions, just use north, south, east, and west. It becomes more and more difficult. And I found myself really working and struggling to say, how would I draw this out? I can draw something out and kind of give you the canyons, but then I realized how many people would mistake one place for the other if the roads are gone. Now, right now, people are going to find it obvious. It's like, okay, he's telling me to go down this big canyon. Well, there's a parking lot there. I'm going to follow that. But that could be misleading too. So what were Waltz's directions intending? And like I said, John Spangler, a number of people, Jim Bark, Sims Ely, the information they had brought them and drove them into a specific area. And we put up the Bark notes so people would see that they did find things there. There were the iron bars that would go over the burrows of mules that held pack saddles. They found a bunch of those in Marsh Valley. So they found specific things in old wells and things that they felt tied into a lot of specific activity. So when someone says, well, it couldn't have happened there, it's not even in the superstitions, so there's too much evidence. Plus, they were in there early on. You got to remember, Bark and Sims Ely, the first 10, 15, 20 years are in there looking around, and Bark had a lot of carte blanche just to go wherever he wanted. So they're discovering bits and pieces of things that are evidence that we don't even find anymore. We can't even find those types of things. I think it's been picked so clean by so many people. And I'm sure there's a few things left. But people will argue all that stuff, and I'll say, but they have physical evidence in a specific area of Mexican mining activity, which is what we want. We don't want Spanish, we don't want Jesuit, we want Mexican mining activity that follows a specific story. The moment we get off the story or the details or something that we know directly came from Waltz, we're in trouble. So that diary journal of John Tuning's and certain information, we've always said the 25, 30 questions that Petrash and Julia Thomas were asked repeatedly and always gave the same answers to, that would be specific good information. I bet you if you had Jim Bark today, he would sit back and Jim Bark would tell you there's a few things I should have asked them specifically. He was looking to kind of find out what details and how detailed the details were. We have a lot of, but then the problem becomes so many people afterwards gave all kinds of BS history. And the problem with that is a good phone discussion I had last night, and unconvincing, was there so often is someone goes and introduces themselves and says they have specific information, and they'll have typewritten pages of something that they say they saw once or they have in their possession, but they really don't, and they have a lot of excuses. And then they get information out and people find it fascinating and they're writing a book and they utilize it. And there's a number of books that have information that is absolutely fraudulent. And the person knows, but they find, I don't know, maybe they feel uplifted by creating this fabrication of bullshit. And what it does is it disturbs and creates more and more problems. And they find they can pull information. Maybe originally they thought these embellishments and lies actually got them inside track information to really find something. And they really were searching. But it eventually just becomes a big hoax. And then people start to find out, because unfortunately as the future and we continue to move forward, more and more information comes out and it's easier to find the holes in things, especially when it's really, really bad. And then it just completely destroys things. But the problem is there's still people that read that book, then they go online. Now, if you want the worst possible information about the Lost Dutchman Mine, go generally to forums and just general online information. The reason I wanted to put the Bark notes up is give people an early source, specific source of information, because that is a huge problem. Like I said, everybody looks at things in a particular way and not realizing, did Jacob Waltz know that was called Weaver's Needle even? There's no reference to it, so I would think if it's somewhere in that vicinity, or he knew the name of it, or that. He didn't refer to them as the four peaks or anything. He said there's four peaks. So we don't know anything specific language name. So try that. I think everybody should step back, and especially people who are really familiar with the mountains. And I want to have this conversation at the rendezvous with a few people, and I'll have a few phone call conversations of like, I want you to sit back and tell me right now, without doing like a week's thinking on it, how would you tell me to get to this spot? Now, there's no roads, no trails, no paths, no nothing. You're starting me at Central and Jackson, downtown Phoenix. Take me there. And I think, most of us would sit there and go, man, that's really, really hard, because you got to think so hard about what's there on the trail. And I don't think Waltz had that kind of photographic memory probably to remember. He knew his route and certain specific things, but he didn't know the area in general. And all you got to do is mistake one thing for one thing, another thing, and boom, you're way off. So there's that. So hopefully everybody can take that and use that and kind of run through their mind. Those familiar with the mountains, trying to figure out how to explain to get people in the mountains, and those not familiar with the mountains understanding. Get some books, get some topo maps, start going through, and each time you go in, start looking at the side canyons. I had the experience of my life of being able to go so far in, and then maybe it's not as far as I wanted, but then go down all the side canyons. Because each side canyon you go down, you find evidence of one thing or the other. And it basically accumulates. And what you find is you can sit around talking to some people and go, oh, okay, I know what you're talking. There's that boulder. It's got that big black streak on it. I don't know. It's like a weird kind of like it's sitting in there by that waterfall. And we'll talk. And people look at us funny. But we know specific terrain things because we've been in through those different areas. Explaining and telling someone how to get there is so hard for us because we're thinking you need to know what I'm seeing, and if you've never been there before, how do I describe that? It's very, very difficult. So there's this week's Chasing Legends. Hope everybody enjoyed that. Next week we'll go start traveling around the Southwest and find some real treasure stories, and we'll revisit very different things. I thank everybody for their patience and everything else. Hope you enjoyed last week's Dawns of Arizona video. I don't want to corrupt them with music or audio, and maybe we'll redo it and put it out sometime where we talk. Me and Greg Davis do some audio with it. But I think it needs to stand alone so you're looking at it and kind of just being in the moment of what they were and when they were there. And I think that's much better archival than me going in and saying something that I'm not quite sure of. None of those people are alive. And as I've worked, and I have a huge amount of files I've been compiling about the Don's rosters and the treks and so forth, there's a lot of information missing. And so I can kind of get a gist of something, but I don't really want to do that. It's much easier for all of us just to sit back, enjoy, see the footage, and see. Now, obviously, that's before the Don's camp itself. This was early trek after they'd moved down to the Peralta trailhead. But other than that, there's not a lot. You can't really pinpoint a lot of some of the specific things that were happening that day and what was going on. We could all share the same and gain the same amount of knowledge by viewing it. So I hope everybody enjoyed that. Hope everybody enjoys this. I hope everybody has a great week. I hope it's at least 20 degrees cooler than it is here. It is abnormally warm here, and when you get up in the morning at 4 or 5 o'clock and it's 98 degrees, it just sucks. So I got about 2 more months before I get any relief, but I hope you're getting some relief at your home. And until the next time, always remember, I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not. And this was Chasing Legends.